This is part 5 of my Outlander Season 7, Episode 12 review. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers, please do keep on scrolling. What I love about their dynamic in this scene is that as they start to talk about themselves more, that is when they both start to not only open up, but have sort of a banter between them that seems pretty effortless. And I think for Jane, that is part of the gig, is to be friendly, be flirty, offer wine and drinks and entertainment. But for her to actually talk to someone who just wants to talk to her, I imagine was very refreshing and intriguing for her. William reiterates to her once again that he really genuinely just paid for the night so that she could have a night where she could sleep and that no one would bother her, especially Harkness. And she kind of jokes with him that that's offensive to her in a way, and he makes it very clear that he is definitely attracted to her, but he's trying to do the honorable thing by her here and also apologize for his behavior the last time they interacted with one another here. I think for William, the big thing that he's trying to prove to himself here is that he can keep his own word and be an honorable person, and she identifies that, but I think she can see through the facade and tell that he just needs closeness with someone and someone who will let him fall apart, essentially. I think when William asks Arabella what her real name is, that's really kind of like the last layer of both of them kind of sharing their false identities and also their true identities. And for William, I think he is finding a way to relate to someone who is going by a false name and a false facade of a story of who they are, because William feels like that now that he knows that his whole life is a lie. And so that brings her, I think, closer to him because she can tell how much he's hurting, but also he's showing interest in who she is outside of this realm that he is meeting her in. I think Jane just oozes charisma and positive energy, and her ability to kind of make William relax and just be present is something that I really love about their dynamic with one another. And their story is quite tragic, and so for me, watching this scene play out was quite special, just knowing how close they will get and how their stories are going to continue to be interwoven with one another and the outcome of that down the line. Without spoiling too much, but she becomes a very important part of William's life, and for it to end the way it does, their storyline ending, it's going to be impactful, I think, but the relationship building between the two of them in this episode, just in these two scenes that they have, was monumental for me. I thought it was beautifully done. I also want to give a shout out to the actress that they cast to play Jane. Her name is Sylvia Presente. I might be butchering that. She's great. I really love her casting. I think she is the perfect Jane. They share their intimate moment, and I think William kind of comes apart emotionally for her. And at the end, he's upset because she won't allow him to keep his honor. And I love the line that she delivers at the end here. And she questions him, have you ever thought that maybe someone like me has a sense of honor too? And I just love their push-pull dynamic that they share in the books, and it's coming to life really beautifully on the show so far. Now back with Lord John, Denzel is trying to covertly help him to escape because he knows that what they have planned for him at this point is not good. So he brings him some stew, and in it he gives him a little tool to help break him free over the course of the night. And he tells Lord John that he has a wagon that will be going to Philadelphia with him in the morning, and that he will transfer him and help him get away. But Lord John in the books doesn't want to endanger him or Dottie. They obviously are changing that because Dottie is not present, but he tells him that he's not going to loop him into this escape and try and do it on his own. Now this is the scene that has the biggest change from the books. The dialogue is almost identical, but where and how this scene between Jamie and Claire takes place is changed a lot from the book version. Now, in the show, Jamie returns back to Philadelphia to Lord John's home, and Claire is there alone because Mrs. Fig has left, and so they have the house to themselves for the night. And in the books, Claire is actually in a gardening. In the books, Claire's been going to the Bartram family gardens to get supplies for medicinal reasons. And so she ends up going there in the books, and Jamie finds her there, and they have this conversation on a bench out in this garden. This family are Quakers, so Claire actually asks them a lot of questions about marriage, and is thinking about both Denzel and Dottie, but also young Ian and Rachel in asking a lot of these questions. So it's a much bigger scene and sets up a little bit more context and backstory for the overarching storylines that are going on, but I can kind of see why they cut this part out. It's probably more so to do with the set dressings, and I really don't know why they cut it out or changed the location, but usually there's a reason. But in the books, she is planting things and looks up, and Jamie's standing there, and she just says, "Oh." Now, like I said, the actual dialogue of this scene is almost verbatim what is in the books, and I think that having such a long scene with plenty of time to have these two duke it out is, first of all, very reminiscent of season 1, 2, 3, Jamie and Claire, and how they used to deal with any of the difficulties that faced them. And also, it's been such a long time since we've seen the two of them really interact with each other on screen that it was refreshing to have such a long scene without it feeling spliced by some of the other storylines. And that's something that I think these later books of Outlander, it's the biggest difference, I would say, between the earlier parts of the story before Claire goes back into her own time versus after, is that there's so many more people that Diana is writing about and following up with, that we have less Jamie and Claire than the original story and the earlier seasons showcase. And for some people that is frustrating and difficult, but that's how it goes in the books as well. There's just so many more characters and things going on and different places and locations that this story is taking place in, and they're all interwoven in their own delicate way. But that means, in order to have the payoffs that they do, that you have to spend time with each of those different people and scenes and moments, and that's the biggest difference that I think at this point in the Outlander story. The books and the show are two different stories at this point. They have deviated away from a lot of the book storylines simply because they can't fit them in. So this moment where we're having just Jamie and Claire together, I think feels more special for that reason, and it did in the books as well. So one thing I will say is that as Jamie enters this conversation with Claire, he is coming at it from a very specific angle and with very specific feelings that Lord John initiated in him by egging him on in the way that he did. And so he's angry, and he really, really, really in his brain needed to go through the details with Claire in order to pull himself out of this rage that he's feeling. And so he's pretty insistent that they hash it all out and put it all out in the open, because for him to wrap his brain around what happened, he really needs all the details in order to do that. And that also highlights a key difference between him and Claire, because I think a lot of people think that Jamie's reaction, or overreaction some might say, to the situation is unfair of him or hypocritical, but he needs to see reason in order to find that common ground with Claire again. And I think that this particular argument that they have is a perfect example of how his brain works versus how her brain works, and then why they work so well together. So I'm going to do this conversation in a separate video just because it is so juicy, so come back for part 6.